Good evening. This is Jeff Vandehei from Brilliant High School, coming to you with a little bit of a primer on financial aid. Um, Financial aid comes up for those who've been in the game a while. You know this. For those who you're having your first senior this year, financial aid, the real big part of the process starts on October 1st, or at least the window opens on October 1st. Might be a better way to put it. October 1st, something called the FAFSA becomes available, and the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. So what we're going to do on this webcast is we're going to walk you through the FAFs, walk you through the components that you're going to go through as you go through the process of getting your child eligible for financial aid. So as you see on the PowerPoint today, this PowerPoint itself should be about 25 minutes, I'm guessing. It's a little abbreviated. Usually we've had college reps come down and give these PowerPoints, and they're a little bit more lengthy. This is a little bit more abbreviated version. I'm going to follow it up with about a 15, 20-minute PowerPoint screencast on free money opportunities, basically scholarship opportunities. And then, at the risk of overkill, but I'd rather give too much information than too little, you'll be getting an email. At least brilliant folks will be getting an email with a link to College Goal, which has a little presentation with tips on the FAFSA, as well as a Zoom where you can get your questions answered by experts on the FAFSA. And then a fourth thing that will be coming forth again in that email on October 1st or 2nd will be about a 200-point PowerPoint slide from the federal government on the FAFSA, which really goes into depth. It has a table of contents. So if there's one area where you're really, really cloudy and you want to delve into it, that 200-point PowerPoint, that 200-slide PowerPoint will probably be the ticket for you to get some clarity on that. Otherwise, there's always a financial aid office at your school. That is really the go-to place in the end if there's questions or cloudiness or anything like that. So today we're going to go through the FAFSA process and timetable, what happens after the FAFSA. Towards the very end, we're going to hit something about parents just because that's where some confusion comes in, especially with divorce situations. And like I said, I will put together a second screencast on free money opportunities. So that's basically the agenda. That's what I'm expecting to get through as we go through this. So two main steps as you go through the financial aid process this year. And if you have kids in school, just know if you had a freshman this past year, you go through the FAFSA every single year. So you do it once a year. They have to have that in case circumstances change. So the FAFSA is something you do yearly. But the first thing we do is we get something called an FSA ID. And both the students and parents need that FSA ID, Federal Student Aid ID. The predominant use of that is to sign the FAFSA. After that, we're going to go through how to some things about completing the FAFSA and then what comes after. So as far as the FSA ID goes, the website is right here. You can come back and revisit it. This will be in the link I give you, fsaid.ed.gov. That's going to take you to a page where you go through and get your ID so you can sign at the end. Again, both the student and the parent needs to do this. They have to have an ID because the FAFSA has both student and parent sections, and you have to sign off on those. And another thing I should say is once you get a FAFSA, once you get an FSA ID, it's your FSA ID for life. So if you have 4 kids that are going to go through school and you have to go through every year and put your signature on that, whatever you put for your ID is going to be your ID for the rest of your life. Okay. FSA IDs should be pretty simple to do. I've heard some people about 3-4 years ago say how complicated it was. I think they've got it down now. Basically, what you need is your social security number, birth date, and your email address. And you can go through, as you see, this is the first screen over here of the FSA ID. I think there's only 2 screens, and you hit submit and you're in. So pretty simple process. Just save your ID when you get it. And the second thing I would say with that is if you're a student should use a more permanent email address. What I mean by that is do not use your school email address. That thing is going to time out. If you're going to have an FSA ID and do the FAFSA for 4 years, you're going to want something that's going to be able to last 4 years. So if you have a Gmail or a Yahoo or a Hotmail or something like that, that's what you're going to want to use for your email on the FSA ID. Okay. Okay, next slide here. After you get through the FSA ID, you're going to be actually applying for the FAFSA. The website is right there. One thing to note, and I wrote that on the bottom, the first F in FAFSA is free. Every year we get a couple people who get on some screen and the screen asks for something like $89.95 or something like that, and they think they're doing the FAFSA. There's some lookalike sites that are scam sites, and they charge you money, and then they just shuffle your info over to the real FAFSA. So things happen for you, but you end up paying for something you shouldn't. The first F is free. If anyone asks you for money, you're on the wrong site. Get off of that site. Don't pay the money, and go back to this one. Essentially, if it ends in gov, you're at the right place. Okay, as far as completing the FAFSA, some things you're going to need for that, they're listed on the right-hand side, things that you're going to have in hand as you complete it. The FAFSA takes from what people have told us, probably about 30 minutes. It might even be the case for half of you that you don't even need this PowerPoint. You would just work through it, just like many of you do your taxes. And if they're simple, you get them done in about 30 minutes. It's a similar deal to that. You need your income, and your asset information. Essentially, you need your bank information and your income information. So, and both the student and the parent have sections where they have to do that. You do not need to report the value of your primary dwelling if you have a house and it's worth whatever, $180,000 or whatever. That has nothing to do with the FAFSA itself on the regular one, but there are records they will need, and those records are listed on this side. So you'll need those from 2019. It is possible, now I'm going to contradict myself just a tiny bit here, it is possible that some schools may have an internal form in addition to the FAFSA. Maybe that form does ask for the value of your house. Those are mostly private schools if they do that, but the majority of schools, the FAFSA is sufficient. Bottom line is, whatever the school asks you for, you just fill out and give it to them. That's part of their process, part of your process. You just do what you're supposed to do. But for most of you, the FAFSA will be sufficient to get you into the aid formula. So students can send scores to 10 colleges for free. Students can send their FAFSA information to 10 schools for free, and those 10 schools will work out formulas and try to put together an award offer. Take just a second here and mention something called special circumstances. The reason for that is you're going to put in your 2019 tax information. So you don't have to wait until 2020 is done. But what happens is, by the time you start school, if you've got a senior right now, by the time they start school, it's September of 2021. Well, a lot can change from the tax year of 2019 to September of 2021. So if something changes significantly in your asset or income situation, you're going to have to talk to the financial aid administrator at that school and see if they can take your special circumstances into account. It's called professional judgment. They can do that. I've had a couple of situations where I got myself involved. That doesn't happen very often. But we had a student whose one of their parents went to jail. So that parent's income went from, say, $70,000 to zero. Okay, so then on the spot, the financial aid administrator at that school, and it was a UW system school, I was in the office with the kid, adjusted the aid accordingly, and the student got a much better deal. The second situation I was involved in, actually, we had a student who was living with somebody in Brillion. The student's mother had died, and the student's father, although not convicted, was suspected of the death, being involved in the death. So with that situation, there was no comfortable way for the student to be at home, and the student wasn't going to be getting support from that person at home. It was just an ugly situation. So that person had to essentially work to become independent and not have their parent income count, which is very rare. But in that situation, it needed to be at least considered by the school. So, okay, if you do get into one of those special circumstances, could be a lot of things. Could be somebody got laid off from their job, somebody went disabled, somebody retired, there was a death like we talked about, just any of those things, any of those odd circumstances that don't usually happen. There's professional judgment by the school sometimes you're going to require documentation. We talked about the second one there. The young lady's mother had died. She had to produce a death certificate. At the time, I thought that was ridiculous, but I do understand it now. Those things do exist, but it was kind of a tough task, I guess, for a 17-year-old in a different state to have to go through that part of the process and go back and try to come up with the documents needed. But if they need more documentation, they need what they need, and you have to come up with it. So, but special circumstances rely on the school. One school may give all kinds of latitude and understanding. One school may give none. That's the way it is, just as with all of life. And you just go through that process. So, okay. As far as the FAFSA, what happens with the FAFSA itself, the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, when you fill out your information, the federal government has a standard formula to determine something called an EFC, or expected family contribution. I'm going to tell you on the front end, there's a great chance you're not going to agree with what they call your expected family contribution, but that's what their formula is designed to come up with. So they put together the formula with income, assets, student, parents, and come up with an expected family contribution from that. That's the first thing they do. Okay. Right there, I just kind of talked about this. It's calculated. The methodology uses both parent and student information, standard income. Now, there's asset protection allowances, especially as a person gets older. They exclude some of that information from the FAFSA formula. So if you are a 53-year-old parent, you may have $80,000 that's excluded if you have an assets from the formula itself or something like that. They don't expect to take every penny from you as you get older and closer to needing to support yourself in your non-working years. So, but anyway, there is an asset protection allowance built in, and it's higher the older you get. That's as specific as I can get. Okay. Somebody asked me, what if the student's footing the whole bill? Hey, what if parents aren't going to help, and we tell Sammy, hey, Sammy, this is college. This is your deal. Unfortunately, that really doesn't play in at all. The formula remains the same. The feds don't talk about parents' willingness or philosophy. They just have the standard formula for each family, and the formula does remain the same. So they are going to ask for parent income, regardless if the parent is putting anything into the investment or not. Okay, right here's a page that tells you that. Unless you fall into one of these categories right here, you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to put down your parent information. Now, if you fall into one of these categories, and it's a little bit hard to read probably in the screencast, but you'll be able to read it a little bit better in the PowerPoint itself later. But if you're in foster care, if you're a veteran, if you're married, if you have a dependent of your own, if you were born before 1997, puts you around 25 years old, those types of things. This would be 1996 now. If you're born between January 1st and 1996, all those things would put you in independent status to where you wouldn't need parent information. But those things are rare. I would say 95% of our seniors are going to need to be dependents where the parent income will be included. Okay, this is the most basic look at what a formula would look like. COA equals cost of attendance at a school minus the EFC that they calculated, and from that they determine the student's financial need. As far as what they can give you, it can come out in all forms. When they give you financial aid, it doesn't mean they're just giving you that much cash. If they say they're going to give you $6,000 in financial aid, grants and scholarships are basically getting free money or cash, if you will. But loans and work study also count as part of the financial aid. So even though you're aid eligible, it's possible that a bulk of the stuff that you get, in fact, there's a great chance, will come from loans and work study. That's just all four of those things factor into what they call giving you aid. Somebody could argue, what do you mean work study is aid? I mean, the kid's working. He's got a job. He could do that anywhere. He's doing it right now. But work study does count as part of the aid package. If they give you a work study of $1,800, that's part of the deal. And, it's debatable whether a student takes that or not. The one pro on a work study is they're usually pretty darn flexible in hours. They pay okay, and that money doesn't count against your next year's FAFSA, from what I understand. But it's just convenient work. If you work at a school, you might work on campus security, you might work in their cafeteria, whatever, but they can work around your schedule if you have different things going at different times. So it's just a little bit easier to guarantee you a job and make it friendly to your hours. Okay. When you get into the FAFSA, one thing that can help the process a little bit, they have something called the data retrieval tool from the IRS. If you don't have your taxes right in front of you, if you're not so sure, you can electronically get those retrieved from the IRS by filling out a little bit of information. Just a quick note on the IRS data retrieval tool. The address must be an exact match to your tax records. Okay, so you're going to put in, of course, probably your social security number and date of birth, and that's going to be easy. But your address must be an exact match, so you might want to have your tax records handy, because if you put ST on one and fill out the whole word street on the other, it may not come through. So the address must be an exact match. That's how cyberspace works. Cyberspace and computers, if things don't match exactly, I get that all the time. My last name is Vandehei. Because of the space, some computers call it just High and consider Vanda the middle name, and it messes things up. So it must be an exact match. Just make sure that your address does match exactly if you use that data retrieval tool. Or if you get an error message, recheck your address if you want to use that. Okay, and then when you're done with the FAFSA, when you put in all your information, like I said, for most people with simple situations, it takes about 30 minutes. At the end, you sign and submit, and it actually says here, if you look really closely, it says what happens next. Within 7 to 10 days after you sign and submit, both the parent and the student sign and submit. There's a part for each of them to sign and submit there. After you do that, within 7 to 10 days, you're going to get something called an SAR, a student aid report. That's written on the page before, 7 to 10 days for an SAR. Student aid report. Student aid report just basically verifies your information, and it tells you if you're going to get something called a Pell Grant, which is for the more needy of families. It's cash money from the federal government for the most needy of families. You can get a Pell Grant if you fall into that category. The SAR will tell you that you are eligible or you are not eligible for a Pell Grant. They say they're going to mail it to you within 7 to 10 days. I don't promise anything time-wise. I do think also, though, the SAR, the student aid report, can be found if you sign back into your FAFSA electronically. I think you're going to see it online as well. But 7 to 10 business days is what they say. After that, you're going to get a financial aid offer from the school that you're going to go to, and I'm going to tell you the timetable is going to vary. So if you think it's getting ridiculously long, you can call the school and say, is everything okay? But don't expect it to be the same from one school to the next. If you got a nephew at Oshkosh and he got his financial aid offer back already, and your kid's going to Stevens Point, and it's 3 weeks later, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means their timetables vary. They got different. Their offices are staffed differently. Some are quicker. Some are slower. They don't guarantee a timetable on that. I don't even want to give a normal on it. But do know it will take longer than that 7 to 10 days to get that financial aid offer, or they're going to offer you, whatever loans or work study or possibly grants that you're going to get from a need-based situation. So on the next slide, what this shows you is that we told you that your income and assets are what gets collected. This screen will show you that by the methodology that your income counts the most. Income counts more than assets. If you look across here, this is the parents' income. As the income changes, there's some pretty big jumps. Conversely, if you go on, say, this line here by 80,000 of family income, as the assets change, the jumps are much smaller. The jumps are getting maybe 1,400 per category. It jumps up. Whereas if we go down this way, this as income changes in this part here, it goes up $7,000 as far as what they call, parents' ability to pay or expected family contribution, part of the deal. So income counts more than assets, I guess, is the bottom line there. So, I think the reason they lay that out there is they don't want you to go sell your brand new car thinking, oh my God, I'm going to bring my assets down and it's not going to mean that much, or go buy a new car so you don't have it in your bank account. Don't go do anything drastic. The assets count, but the income counts a heck of a lot more. That's what the table is all about. Okay, this page here is an interesting page. You will hear about deadlines. Now, just because you're getting this presentation around October 1st, for goodness sakes, don't think the deadline is October 1st. In fact, deadline is actually a fake word. It's kind of a misnomer. There aren't really deadlines for the financial aid. In fact, a person that's a freshman in college right now would have till June 30th of this year to go back and still file the financial aid form for this current year. So it could even be retroactive. So there's not a deadline. What schools have is they have a preferred filing date. They prefer that you file. So if you look at this list right here, you can't see it real well, but Eau Claire says they prefer that you file by March 15th. Green Bay says we really prefer that you get things in by January 15th. La Crosse has a Feb 1st. The earliest ones that I see, Madison, Milwaukee, one or two others, are going to say December 1st. That's the earliest ones I see are December 1st. What that means is the reason they have a preferred filing date is sometimes schools will run out of certain types of aid, certain pockets of aid. The federal government might subsidize, say UW-Stevens Point, might give them $4 million for Pell Grant money. If enough students come in that qualify for Pell Grant, that $4 million is gone, then you file the FAFSA, say really late, like in middle of May, you might not get Pell Grant money because you filed so late, okay? But none of them seem to be worried about anything happening before December 1st. So I think it'd be a pretty safe strategy to just plan on filing your FAFSA sometime between October 1st and December 1st. And according to what the schools are publishing, that shouldn't be a worry about anything being affected. Okay. Moving on, loans are probably the most common type of aid that a person's going to get. They're called federal direct student loans nowadays. And like I said, they're kind of the most common. There's two words that sometimes get people a little confused. There's subsidized and there's unsubsidized. And what subsidized means is that your interest does not accrue. If you borrow $5,000 one year on subsidized loan, when you graduate, that amount still will be $5,000. Whereas if you borrow $5,000 as a freshman now and unsubsidized, by the time you graduate with interest, that loan amount could be, $5,500 or something like that, because interest is accruing for all 4 years. So unsubsidized means interest is going to start tacking on day one. Subsidized means interest doesn't start coming until you start paying the loan back. So subsidized is better. I'd say always take a subsidized loan. Most people will probably take an unsubsidized also, but always take the subsidized. It's the best of all loans. Okay. As far as annual loan limits go, they vary by year. But if you're a dependent student, I've got numbers right over here. For the federal direct loans, the dependent student can get up to $5,500 the first year, $6,500 the second year, and $7,500 in total the third and fourth year, just in straight out loans from those venues, from these federal direct student loans. The numbers in parentheses are how much can be subsidized. So not all of it can be subsidized, but if you qualify, this amount can be subsidized loan. I'm going to make a little point here. This kind of answers a little bit of a question. What if you're filthy rich, for God's sakes? What if you have $1 million, but you think your kid should earn his own way and go to school? Should you do the FAFSA because you're not going to get anything? Well, pretty much you're not going to get anything, but every student is eligible for an unsubsidized federal direct student loan. Unsubsidized is not based on needs, so your student, no matter how wealthy your family is, can get an unsubsidized loan. So in that case, if you say we've got a good amount of money and won't get anything in your mind, but you want your student to pay their own way, they might get a better deal with the unsubsidized loan than they can get anywhere else. So you may as well do the FAFSA anyway, just for that reason. The other thing is, okay, so here's the problem. School is going to cost, tuition, room, and board at, say, a place like UW Stevens Point is going to be $16,000. If I can only borrow this much and I've only got a little bit saved, what else can I do if you don't have any other cash money? There's a couple things. There's something called a PLUS loan. PLUS loan, the P in PLUS stands for parent. You can borrow up to the full cost of higher education with a PLUS loan. There are also something called alternative loans that you can get. Sallie Mae is the most common, but a lot of banks have gotten back into the student lending game. So there's PLUS loans and there's alternative loans to patch things, to bridge that gap when the loans you get, the federal direct student loans, are not enough. Okay, so the most common practice when you get offered loans, most people will take the direct loans, whatever they are. If they get offered the PLUS loan, they'll shop it. By shop it, I mean they're going to check around and see what other alternative loans they can get that might beat the PLUS. What I would do if you're looking at loans, one note I would make, and I made note on the bottom of the slide, I take a look at what's called loan origination fees. What that means is sometimes a loan, maybe the PLUS, will have something like a 4% loan origination fee. Well, holy cats, that's a lot of money. So if you borrowed $10,000 in a PLUS, but they're taking a 4% fee off the top, that means you're borrowing $10,000, but your check to the student or the school is only going to be $9,600. So you're losing some money you're losing 4% before you even start by a loan origination fee. So something to just keep your eyes open for if you get into that game of PLUS loans and alternative loans and things like that. Okay. All right, I promised that we'd talk a little bit about the parent situation, and this is put out by the College Board, a pretty reputable college institution on situations. And basically the deal is, if parents are married, both parents' income counts. If parents are living in the same house and not married, both parents' income counts. So you can't just you can't get divorced just to get more financial aid, for one. Or if you live together forever and never got married, you count. Okay. If the parents are in separate places and not remarried, then only one parent counts. Okay, so if you're in a divorce situation and you did not get remarried, then which parent counts? It says on here that you should claim the parent that you lived with the most in the last 12 months. That's the one whose income should count. It's not the one who makes the most. It's not the one who claims you on taxes. It's the one that you lived with the most in the last 12 months. And then they say if it's a tie, you should go to the one who gave you the most financial support. I'm not going to tell you how to play that one out. There's maybe some subjectivity there, but that's how it reads. Okay, where it gets a little bit tricky, two things I'm going to mention now. As far as if you did get remarried and you're the place where the student lived the most, it goes on your income and the step parent that you married. And people say, well, that's not even my biological son. How come I'm included? That's the way the formula reads. It's the parent you lived with the most and whoever they're married to. Whether it was the original father or it's a stepfather or whatever it would be, it's whoever you're married to. If the parent is remarried, include the information about the step parent. Is how the rule reads. So that's just how the rule reads. One thing that gets pretty tricky, I think, I don't know if I have it here, but one thing that gets pretty tricky is, what if you got divorced or separated after you filed taxes in 2019? That one to me gets a little bit tricky, because if you file jointly, both of your incomes are on there, but now you're not living in the same house. So it's going to be tricky because your tax information will include both of you, and it shouldn't. In that case, bye. Yeah, sorry for that pause. That was an answering machine next to my computer. But if you're divorced or separated after that 2019 filing jointly situation, you're going to have to file and then contact your school, and they're going to have to work you through the process of refiling and somehow separating out the money so that only the single parent who's now with the student gets included. Okay, so that's an important thing to just keep in mind. If you're including somebody's income who's no longer in the picture, there's going to be a two-step process to get that person's income out of there. So, okay, few things to wrap up here. You can go to any student, any college site, and you should be able to put in the search bar net price calculator, and they should be able to give you the net price of going to that school if that is something appealing to you. Okay. Another thing is something called federal verification. You go through this whole process of the FAFSA, apply for aid, and you get a notice that you've been selected for federal verification. My first line on there was don't freak out. Okay, the reason I'm saying that is it doesn't mean you got flagged because something looked poofy or you did something wrong. There's an actual percentage. I don't know exactly what the percent is, but there used to be a percent, something like 28%, where the federal government mandated that schools would verify so many students. So a lot of federal verification is randomly selected. So don't freak out. But on the flip side, also do move fairly quickly on the federal verification to give them whatever information they need, because now they're in a spot where they're not going to make your award offer until this verification process gets rolled through. So you shouldn't lose any money because of it. I haven't heard of anyone doing that. But if you dawdle and wait too long, if you wait a couple months to give them their verification stuff, if you file mid-November and they ask you for verification, you don't give it to them till early March, now you do run the risk of missing out on, say, work study or Pell Grant money or something like that. So just move relatively quickly. Not like, oh my God, in the next 12 hours, but just don't let it sit too long if you ask for verification. And don't automatically think that something terrible has happened or they flagged something or thought you were cheating or something, because that's not the case. Okay, last thing I'm going to mention is this usually doesn't get talked about in financial aid presentations, but there are a few tax credits designed just to get money to you for your kid going to school. There's something called the American Opportunity Tax Credit and Lifetime Learning Tax Credit. I will talk about those a little bit more in the next PowerPoint. Okay, and finally, I'm going to say that the FAFSA completion, there's some FAFSA completion virtual events out there. A place called College Goal, which has been doing things for years for students, has put out 6 or 7 different dates that start at 6 o'clock at night, where they have a link. I'll be sending it to brilliant parents, at least in the first couple of days of October. They have a link where you can sign up, and the first part they go through tips on the FAFSA, and the second part there is a Zoom link where you can actually ask your questions to those experts. If there's a couple of things that you went through and saying, hey, I'm still a little bit cloudy on this, I want to get this pinned down before I actually file. I notice all these dates are in that time frame I said. They're all in October and November. So I said you're probably pretty safe anytime between October 1st and December 1st. If you want to wait and sit through one of the FAFSA virtuals, more power to you. There's also, like I said, a 200-point PowerPoint slide from the federal government that I'm going to kick out to you early in the first week of October, and that may be helpful as well. So that's all I've got for right now. If you have any questions, if they're in depth, to be honest, the financial aid administrator at your school would be the best place to go. If you think they're simple ones, or you think I just misspoke on something or misworded something here, just give me a jingle or give me an email. It's Jeff Andehai at Brilliant High School. And I'd appreciate the chance to help out if I could. So another PowerPoint coming soon. That one will be on the free money opportunities at Brilliant High School. Thank you very much.